Hello everyone, and welcome back to Go, Reading Irish Myths and Legends, with myself, Dr. Emmett Taylor. Here, we read out-of-copyright academic translations of medieval Irish literature. No retellings or reimaginings, just the words of medieval Ireland, right to your ears. This week, we'll be reading Tochmarc Emire, the Wooing of Emer, which I always find is a popular tale among students, as in it we get a chance to meet Emer, Cuchulainn's wife, an exceptionally cool character who we will revisit next week, and Scáthach, the powerful woman warrior who teaches Cuchulainn a range of curious martial arts. There is a tremendous amount of interesting detail to discuss in regards to this story, and I would encourage listeners to keep a close ear to the details of the relationship between Emer and Cuchulainn, and consider the role the patriarchy plays in this story, and how older men force their will upon both Emer and Cuchulainn. The specific version of Tochmarc Emire which we will be reading today is what Rory O'Higgin refers to as Tochmarc Emire Recension 2, which is a decidedly Middle Irish tale, meaning that it was composed approximately between the 10th and 13th centuries. I have opted for Tochmarc Emire Recension 2 rather than 1 for this episode, as Recension 1 is missing the entire beginning of the tale, where Cuchulainn and Emer interact, which I think people will be quite interested in. Perhaps in a later season of this podcast we will return to the tale and examine the first recension so you can compare and contrast the two, but for the time being we'll be working with the Middle Irish version. This version is found in 7 manuscripts: Royal Irish Academy Manuscript D-IV2, Royal Irish Academy Manuscript 23E25, better known as a Bhol na Húra, Royal Irish Academy Manuscript 23N10, better known as the Book of Ballycumann, Royal Irish Academy Manuscript 23E29, better known as the Book of Fermoy, British Library Manuscript Egerton 92, a fragment of the Book of Fermoy, British Library Manuscript Harley 5280, and Trinity College Dublin Manuscript 1339, better known as the Book of Leinster. The version we'll be reading today is by Kuno Meyer, titled The Wooing of Emer, found in Archaeological Review No. 1 from 1888. If you would prefer a more recent translation, I do regret to inform you that we actually do not have any alternatives. While there have been some retellings printed, these are not translations, and therefore not something I wish to include here. Now, with that aside, let us begin. There lived once upon a time a great and famous king in Evan Macha, whose name was Conchobar, son of Fachna Fathach. In his reign there was much store of good things with the men of Ulster. Peace there was, and quiet and pleasant greeting. There was fruit and fatness and harvest of the sea. There was sway and law and good lordship during his time with the men of Ulster. There was great state and rank and plenty in the king's house at Evan. On this wise was that house, that is to say, the Red Branch of Conchobar, after the likeness of the house of the Midcourt. 9 beds were in it, from fire to the wall. 30 feet was the height of each bronze front that was in the house. Carvings of red yew were therein. It was a broad translation cuts below, and a roof of tiles above. The bed of Conchobar was in the front of the house, with boards of silver, with pillars of bronze, with the glitter of gold on their headpieces, and carbuncles in them, so that day and night were equally light in it, with its silver board above the king to the highest part of the royal house. Whenever Conchobar struck the board with a royal rod, all the men of Ulster were silent thereat. The 12 beds of the 12 chariot chiefs were around that bed. Yea, the valiant warriors of the men of Ulster found place in that king's house at the drink, and no man of them would touch the other. Splendid, lavish, and beautiful were the valiant warriors of the men of Ulster in that house. There were great and numerous gatherings of every kind in that house, and wonderful pastimes. There were games and music and singing there, that is to say, heroes were at their feats, poets sang, harpers and players on the timpan struck their sounds. Now, once the men of Ulster were in Evan Macha with Conchobar drinking the Iarn Gall. 100 fillings of beverage went into it every evening. This was the drinking of the coal that would satisfy the men of Ulster at one time. The chariot chiefs of Ulster were performing on ropes stretched across from door to door in the house at Evan. 15 feet and 9 score was the size of that house. The chariot chiefs were performing 3 feats, that is to say, the spear feat and the apple feat and the sword edge feat. These are the chariot chiefs who performed those feats: Conall the Victorious, son of Avergan, Fergus, son of Roich the Overbold, Logier the victorious, son of Connath, Celticar son of Uthakar, Dulftach son of Lugath, Cuchulainn son of Soltov, Scale son of Barnina, from whom the pass of Barnina is named, the warder of Evenmacha. From him is the saying, a story of Skells, for he was a mighty storyteller. Cuchulainn surpassed all of them at those feats, for quickness and deftness. The women of Ulster loved Cuchulainn greatly for his quickness at the feats, for his nimbleness of his leap, for the excellency of his wisdom, for the sweetness of his speech, for the beauty of his face, for the loveliness of his look. For there were 7 pupils in his kingly eyes, 4 of them in his one eye and 3 of them in the other. He had 7 fingers on either hand, and 7 toes on either of his 2 feet. Many were his gifts. First, his gift of prudence, until the warrior's flame appeared, the gift of feats, the gift of buanfach, the gift of draught playing, the gift of calculating, the gift of soothsaying, the gift of sense, the gift of beauty. But 3 faults had Cuchulainn: that he was too young, for his moustache had not grown, and all the more would unknown youths deride him; that he was too daring; that he was too beautiful. The men of Ulster took counsel about Cuchulainn, for their women and maidens loved him greatly, for there was no wife with Cuchulainn at that time. This was the counsel, that they would seek a woman whom Cuchulainn might choose to woo, for they were sure that a man who had a wife to attend him would less ravish their maidens and accept the love of their women. And, besides, they were troubled and afraid that Cuchulainn would perish early, so for that reason they wished to give him a wife, that he might leave an heir, for they knew that his rebirth would be of himself. Then Conchobar sent out 9 men into each province of Erin to seek a wife for Cuchulainn, to see if they would find in any dun or any chief place in Erin the daughter of a king or a chief or a lord of land, whom Cuchulainn might be pleased to choose and woo. All the messengers returned that day a year gone, and had not found a maiden whom Cuchulainn chose to woo. Thereupon Cuchulainn himself went to woo a maiden that he knew in Lochlochta Loga, that is to say, Ever, the daughter of Forgal the Wily. Then Cuchulainn himself and his charioteer, Loich son of Ringavar, went in his chariot. That was the one chariot which the hosts of the horses of the chariot chiefs of Ulster could not follow, on account of the swiftness and speed of the chariot, and of who sat in it. Cuchulainn found the maiden on her playing field, with her foster sisters all around her. These were daughters of the lords of land that lived around the Dun of Forgal. They were learning needlework and fine handiwork from Ever. She was the one maiden who he deigned to address and woo of the maidens of Erin, for she had the 6 gifts, that is to say, the gift of beauty, the gift of voice, the gift of sweet speech, the gift of needlework, the gift of wisdom, and the gift of chastity. Cuchulainn said that no maiden should go with him, but she who was his equal in age and shape and race, and skill and deftness, who was the best handworker of the maidens of Erin, and that none was a fitting wife for him unless such were she. And as she was the one maiden that fulfilled all those conditions, Cuchulainn went to woo her above all. It was in his festal array that Cuchulainn went on that day to address Ever, and to show his beauty to her. As the maidens were sitting on the bench of gathering at the Dun, they heard something coming towards them, the clatter of the horses' hooves, the creaking of the chariot, the cracking of the straps, the grating of the wheels, the rush of the hero, the clacking of the weapons. "Let one of you see," said Ever. "What is that coming towards us?" "Truly I see here," said Fial, daughter of Forgal, 2 steeds of like size, beauty, fierceness, and speed, bounding together. Translation cuts off. High-headed, spirited, powerful, pricking their ears, thin mouths with long tresses, with broad foreheads, much speckled, slightly slender, very broad, impetuous, with curling manes, with curling tails. At the right pole of the chariot is a grey horse, a broad-haunched, fierce, swift, fleet, wild, taking small bounds, broad-maned. Translation cuts off. Thundering, stamping, with curling mane, high-headed, broad-chested, the large gelbed. Translation cuts off. Hard turf is aflame under his 4 hard hooves. A flock of swift birds follows. He takes his course along the road. There darts from him a flash of breath. A blast of red sparkling fire stands out from the end of his curved jaws. The other horse, jet black, hard-headed, round, slender-footed, broad-hooved. Translation cuts off. spirited, curly, plated, tressed, broad-backed, firmly shod. Translation cuts off. Fiery, fierce, strong, striding, firmly stamping, long-maned, curly-maned, long-tailed, with firm curls. Broad of forehead, beautiful, he moves along after having beaten the horses in the land. He bounds over the smooth, dry sward. He follows the levels of the mid-glen. He finds no obstacle in the land. Translation cuts off. A chariot of fine wood, with wicker work, on which are white bronze wheels. A white pole of white silver with a mounting of white bronze. A very high, creaking frame of tin, round and firm. A curved, strong yoke of gold. 2 plated, firm yellow reins. Hard poles, straight as sword blades. A dark, sad man in the chariot, the fairest of the men of Erin. A beautiful purple 5-folded tunic around him, a brooch of inlaid gold on his white breast at the opening, against which it heaves, full strokes beating. A shirt with a white hood, interwoven with red and flaming gold. 7 red dragon gems on the ground of either of his 2 eyes. 2 blue-white blood-red cheeks that breathe sparks and flashes of fire. A ray of love burns in his look. Methinks a shower of pearls have been poured in his mouth, as black as the side of a black... Translation cuts. Each of his 2 eyebrows. A gold-hilted sword resting on his 2 thighs. A blood-red hand-fitted spear with a sharp, mettlesome blade on a shaft of wood. Translation cuts. Is fastened to the copper frame of the chariot, a purple shield with a rim of silver, with ornamental beasts of gold over his 2 shoulders. He leaps the hero's salmon leap. Translation cuts. Many like swift feats over it, the chariot chief of the one chariot. There is a charioteer before him in that chariot, a very slender, long-sided, much freckled man. Very curly, bright red hair on his head, a ring of bronze on his brow which prevents his hair from falling over his face. Patterns of gold on both sides of the back of his head to confine his hair. A shoulder mantle with sleeves about him, with openings at the 2 elbows. A rod of red gold in his hand, with which he keeps the horses in order. Meanwhile, Cuchulainn had come to the place where the maidens were, and he wished a blessing on them. Ever lifted up her lovely fair face and recognized Cuchulainn, and then she said, "May God make smooth the path before you." "May you be safe from every harm," said he. "Whence hast thou come?" she asked. "From Intithe Ebna," he replied. "Where did you sleep?" said she. "We slept," he said, "in the house of the man who tends the cattle on the plain of Tethra." "What was your food there?" she asked. "The ruin of a chariot was cooked for us there," he replied. "Which way didst thou come?" said she. "Between the 2 mountains of the wood," said he. "Which way didst thou take after that?" said she. "Not hard to tell," said he. "From the cover of the sea, over the secret of the men of Dea, over the foam of the 2 steeds of Evan, and over the garden of the Morrigan, over the back of the great sow, over the glen of the great Dove, between the god and his seer, over the marrow of the woman Fedelv, between the boar and his dove, over the washing horses of Dea, between the king of Anna and his servant, to Monchula of the 4 corners of the world, over great crime, over the remnants of the great feast, between Davach and Dabchina, to Loglochta, Loga, to the daughters of the nephew of Tethra, king of the Fuvra." "What is the account of thee, O maiden?" said Cuchulainn. "Not hard to tell, truly," said the maiden. "Tara of the women, whitest of maidens, the..." Translation cuts off. "Of chastity, a prohibition which is not taken, a watchman who sees no one. A modest woman is a worm, a scald crow." Translation cuts. "A rush which none come near. The daughter of a king, a flame of honor, a road that cannot be entered." Translation cuts. "That is to say, I have champions that follow me to guard me from whoever will take me against their pleasure, without their and Forgal's knowledge of my act." "Who were the champions who followed thee, O maiden?" said Cuchulainn. "Not hard to tell, truly," said Evar. "2 Louis, 2 Luath, Luath and Lathgovla, son of Tethra, Triath and Treiscath, Brion and Bolor, Bas son of Omnach, 8 Condola, Conna son of Forgel. Every man of them has the strength of 100, and the feats of 9. Forgel himself, too, hard is it to tell his many powers. He is stronger than any labourer, more learned than any druid, sharper than any poet. It will be more than all your games to fight against Forgel himself, for many powers of his have been recounted. Translation cuts. Of manly deeds. Why dost thou not reckon me, O maiden, with those strong men? Asked Cucullin. If thy deeds have been recounted, why should I not reckon thee among them? Truly I swear, O maiden, said Cucullin, that I shall make my deeds recounted among the glories of the strength of heroes. What then is thy strength? Said Ever. Not hard to tell, truly, said he. When I am weak in a fight, I defend 20. Sufficient for 30 is a third of my strength. I alone make combat against 40. My protection guards 100. Fords and battlefields are avoided for fear and dread of me. Hosts and multitudes, and many armed men flee with terror of my face. Those are good fights of a tender boy, said the maiden, but thou hast not yet reached the strength of chariot chiefs. Truly, O maiden, said he. Well, I have been brought up by my dear foster-father Concobar, not as a churl looks to the heritage of his children, not between a flagstone and the kneading trough, nor from the fire to the wall, nor on the floor of the one larder have I been brought up by Concobar, but among chariot chiefs and champions, among jesters and druids, among poets and learned men, among the lords of land and farmers of Ulster have I been reared, so that I have all their manners and gifts. Who then have brought thee up in all those deeds thou boasteth? Said Ever. Not hard to tell, truly. Fair speech Shencha has taught me, so that I am strong, wise, swift, deft. Translation cuts off. I am wise in judgments. I am not forgetful. Translation cuts off. Anybody before wise men. I attend their speeches. I direct the judgments of all the men of Ulster, and I do not alter them, through the training of Sencha. Bly, the lord of lands, took me to himself on account of the kinship of his race, so that I got my due with him, so that I invite the men of Concobar's province with their king. I entertain them for the time of a week. I settle their gifts and their spoils. I aid them in their honour and fines. Fergus has fostered me, so that I slay strong warriors through the strength of valour. I am fierce in valour and prowess, so that I am able to guard the border of the land against foreign foes. I am a shelter for every poor man. I am a rampart of fight for every wealthy man. I give comfort to each wretch. I deal mischief to each strong man, through the fosterage of Fergus. I came to the knee of the poet Avergon, so that I praise a king for any excellency he has, so that I can stand up to any man in valour, in prowess, in wisdom, in splendour, in cleverness, in justice, and boldness. I am a match for any chariot chief. I give thanks to no one, but to Concobar all. Finnkiv has cared for me, so that the victorious Conall Cernach is my translation cuts foster brother. Cathvid of the gentle face has taught me for the sake of Dechtana, so that I am a skilled student of the arms and the god of druidism, so that I am learned in their excellencies and knowledge. All the men of Ulster have equally brought me up, both charioteers and chariot chiefs, both kings and chief poets, so that I am the darling of the host and multitude, so that I fight for the honour of them all alike. Honourably have I been asked by Luch, son of Con, son of Ethlin. Translation cuts. Of Dechtana to the house. Translation cuts. Of the Bruch. And thou, O maiden, said Cucullin, how hast thou been reared in Loch Lochta Loga? Not hard to tell, truly, answered the maiden. I was brought up, said she, in ancient virtues, in lawful behaviour and keeping chastity, in equal translation cuts, of a queen, in stately form, so that to me is attributed every noble, stately form among the hosts of translation cuts, women. Good are those virtues, truly, said Cucullin. Why then, said he, should it not be fitting for us to both become one? For I have not hitherto found a maiden capable of holding converse with me at a meeting in this wise. A question. Hast thou a wife? Said the maiden. For under my protection. Translation cuts. After thee. Not so, said Cucullin. I may not marry, said the maiden, before the sister who is older than I am, that is to say, Theo, daughter of Forgal, whom thou seest near me here. She is an excellent handiworker. It is not she, truly, with whom I have fallen in love, said Cucullin. Nor have I ever accepted a woman that has known a man before me, and I have been told that yonder girl has slept with Carpla Neafair once. While they were thus conversing, Cucullin saw the breasts of the maiden over the bosom of her smock. Then he said, Fair is this plain. No one comes to this plain, said Ever, who does not slay as many as 100 on each ford, from the ford of Skenman at Olbina to Bancurig Arkad, where swift Brea breaks over the brow of Fedolf. Fair is this plain, the plain of the noble yoke, said Cucullin. No one comes to this plain, said she, who has not achieved the feat of slaying 3 times 9 men with one blow. O calf of the cow. Translation cuts. So as to preserve a man in the midst of each 9 of them. Fair is this plain, the plain of the noble yoke, said Cucullin. No one comes to this plain, said she, who does not meet Ben Swan, son of Rusmelk, from the summer's end to the beginning of spring, from the beginning of spring to May Day, from May Day to the beginning of winter. It is said, it shall be done, said Cucullin. It is offered, it is granted, it is taken, it is accepted, said Ever. A question. What is the account of thee? Said she. I am the nephew of the man that disappears in another, in the wood of Badov, said he. And what is thy name? Said she. I am the hero of the plague that befalls dogs, said he. Of those noble words, Cucullin went from them, and they did not hold further converse on that day. When Cucullin was driving across Bray, Loich, his charioteer, asked him, Now, said he, the words which thou and the maiden Ever spoke, what did you mean by them? Dost thou not know, answered Cucullin, that I am wooing Ever, and it is for this reason that we disguised our words, lest the girls should understand that I am wooing her, for if Forgal knew, we should not meet with his consent. Cucullin then repeated the conversation from the beginning to his charioteer, explaining it to him, to beguile the length of their way. By into Emna, which I said when she asked me, Whence hast thou come? I meant from Evan Macha. It is called Evan Macha from this. Macha, the daughter of Senreath Mac in Voltha, wife of Crundcru, son of Angevon, ran a race against 2 steeds of the king, after she had been forced to it by a strong injunction. She beat them, and bare a boy and a girl at one birth. From those twins, Evan is called. From that, Macha is named the plain of Macha. Or, again, it is from this that Evan Macha is, as it is in the following tale. 3 kings were reigning together over Erin. They were from Ulster. That is to say, Dithorba, son of Diovan, from Usnach of Meath, Aeth the Red, son of Bathoran, son of Erked the Bald, in the land of Aeth, Kimbeath, son of Find Argat, from Finnavar of Mag Inish. It is he who brought up Ulcna the Great, son of Echu the Victorious. Then the men made an agreement that each of them was to reign 7 years. 3 times 7 surtries were pledged between them, 7 druids to revile them forever, or 7 poets to lampoon and satirize and upbraid them, 7 chiefs to wound them and burn them, unless each man gave up his reign at the end of 7 years, having preserved true government, that is to say, the produce of every year without decay of any kind, and without the death of a woman from concubinage. Each of them reigned 3 times in his turn during 66 years. Aeth the Red was the first of them to die, or rather he was drowned in Esruth, and his body was taken into the sheath there, whence sheath Aetha at Esruth. He left no children except one daughter, whose name was Macha the Red-haired. She demanded the kingship in its due time. Kimbeath and Dithorba said that they would not give kingship to a woman. A battle was fought between them. Macha routed them. She was sovereign for 7 years. Meanwhile, Dithorba had fallen. He left 5 noble sons behind, Beath and Bras and Bethach, Ullach and Borbchas. Now, these demanded the kingship, Macha said she would not give it to them. For not by favor did I obtain it, said she, but by force in the battlefield. A battle was fought between them. Macha routed the sons of Dithorba, who left a slaughter of heads before her, and went into exile in the wilds of Connacht. Macha then took Kimbeath to be her husband, and leader of her troops. When, now, Macha and Kimbeath were united, Macha went to seek the sons of Dithorba in the shape of a leper. That is to say, she smeared herself with rye dough, and... Translation cuts off. She found them in Burren Connacht, cooking a wild boar. The men asked tidings of her, and she gave them, and they let her have food by the fire. Said one of them, "Lovely is the eye of the girl. Let us lie with her." She took her with him into the wood. She bound that man by dint of her strength, and left him in the wood. She came back to the fire. "Where is the man who went with thee?" they asked. "He is ashamed to come to you," she replied, "after having lain with a leper." "There is no shame," said they, "for we shall all do the same." Each man took her into the wood. She bound every one of them, one after the other, and brought them all in one chain to Ulster. The men of Ulster wanted to kill them. "No," said she, "for that would be the ruin of my true government. But they shall be thralls, and they shall dig a roth round me, and that shall be the eternal seat of Ulster for ever." She then marked out the dun for them with her brooch, that is to say, a golden pin on her neck, that is to say, a brooch on the neck of Macha. Hence is the name Evan Macha in truth. "The man," I said, "in whose house we slept, he is the fisherman of Concovar. Ronku is his name. It is he that catches the fish on his line under the sea, for the fish are the cattle of the sea, and the sea is the plain of Tethra, a king of the kings of the Fuvra. The cooking hearth," I said, "a foal was cooked for us on it. The foal is the ruin of a chariot to the end of 3 weeks." Translation cuts. "And there is a gesh on a chariot to the end of 3 weeks for any man to enter it after having last eaten horseflesh. For it is the horse that sustains the chariot." "Between the 2 mountains of the wood," I said. "These are the 2 mountains between which we came, that is to say, Sliabh Vuath to the west of us, and Sliabh Chuan to the east of us. We are in Orkel between them, that is to say, the wood which is between them, that is to say, on the road I meant between the 2. The road," I said, "that is to say, the covering of the sea, that is to say, the plain of Marathna. The sea was on it 30 years after the deluge, whence is Teva Mara, that is to say, the shelter or the covering of the sea. Or again, it is from that this is called the plain of Marathna. That is to say, a magic sea was on it, with," translation cuts, "in it, so that one could sit on it, so that a man with his armor might sit down on the ground of," translation cuts, "until the Dagda came with his club of anger, and sang the following words at it, so that it ebbed away at once. Silent thy hollow head, silent thy dirty body, silent thy," translation cuts, "brow." Over the secret of the men of Dea, that is to say, a wonderful secret and a wonderful whisper. It is called the Marsh of Doluth today. Doluth, son of Capra Neafer, was wounded by Mathu. Before that, however, its name was Great Secret of the men of Dea, because it was there that the gathering of the Battle of Moitura was first planned by the Tuatha De Danann, for the purpose of throwing off the tribute, which the Fuvra extracted of them, that is to say, 2/3 of corn and milk and offspring. Over the foam of the 2 steeds of Evan, there is a famous youth reigning over the gales. He had 2 horses reared for him in Sheath Erimon of the Tuatha De. Nevith, son of Nava, was the name of that king. Then those 2 horses were let loose from the sheath, and a splendid stream burst after them from the sheath. And there was great foam on that stream, and the foam spread over the land for a great length of time, and thus to the end of a year, so that hence the water is called Unuv, that is to say, foam on the water, and it is Unuv today. The garden of the Morrigan, I said, that is Ochtor Netmon. The Dagda gave that land to the Morrigan, and she lived there. After a year, she killed Ivor Borkilth, son of Garv, in her garden. The translation cuts, which her garden grew were translation cuts in that year, for the son of Garv was her relation. The back of the great sow, I said, that is Drum Neverg, for the shape of a sow appeared to the sons of Milith on every hill and on every height in Erin, when they came over and wanted to land on it by force, after a spell had been cast on it by the Tuatha De Danann. By the glen of the great Dav, I said, that is to say, Glen Mibrogan and Moy Bray were named after Breoga, son of Breogan, Sandacht, son of Milith. It was called the Glen of the Great Dav, because Dav of Dilla, son of Smirgal, son of Tethra, who was king over Erin, lived there. This Dav died in, translation cuts, a woman, translation cuts, of Moy Bray to the west of the mouth, translation cuts. The road, I said, between the god and his seer, that is to say, between Mach Och of the sheath of the Bruch and his seer, that is to say, Bressal, was a seer to the west of the Bruch. Between them was the one woman, the wife of the smith. This is the way I went. Marna, then, is between the hill of the sheath of the Bruch, in which Oingus is, and the sheath of Bressal, the druid. Over the marrow of the woman Fedelv, I said, that is to say, the Boyne. It is called Boyne from Boand, wife of Nechtan, son of Lavrath. She went to guard the hidden well at the bottom of the Dun with the 3 cupbearers of Nechtan, that is to say, Flex and Lesk and Luov. Nobody came without blemish from that well, unless the 3 cupbearers went with him. The queen went out of pride and overbearing to the well, and said nothing would ruin her shape, nor put a blemish on her. She passed left-hand-wise round the well to deride its power. Then 3 waves broke over her, and smashed her 2 thighs and right hand and one of her eyes. She ran out of the sheath to escape from this injury, until she came to the sea. Wherever she ran, the well ran after her. Shegish was its name in the sheath, the river Shegsa from the sheath to the pool of Mahua, the arm of the wife of Nuadhu, and the thigh of the wife of Nuadhu after that, the Boyne in Meath. Mancurig Arkith it is called from the Finda to the Trova, the marrow of the woman Fedelv from the Trova to the sea. The boar, I said, and his dove, that is, Cleitach and Fesha. For Triath is the name for a boar, the leader of herds, but it is also the name for a king, the leader of the great host. Cleitach, then, translation cuts off, of battle. Fesha, again, is the name of a great sow of a farmer's house. A boar and his dove, between a boar and his sow, then we went. The king of Anna, I said, and his servant, that is to say, Cairna, through which we passed. Sheath Cairna was its name of old. Cairna is its name since the translation cuts off. That is to say, Enna Eichnach slew Cairna, the king of Anna, on that hill, and he slew his steward in the east of that place. Gnina was his name, from which is Rathgniath in Cairna ever. On Gesha, the king of the sons of Evna, did Emna do it, for there was great friendship between Gesha and Cairna. The washing of the horses of Dea, I said, that is to say, Agna. The washing of the horses of Dea was its name originally, because in it the men of Dea washed their horses when they came from the battle of Moitura. It is called Agna after the king whose horses the Tuatha De Danann washed in it. The 4-cornered Manchula, I said, that is, Muanchila. It is where Man, the farmer, was. There was a great mortality of cattle in Erin in the reign of Bressel Brech, son of Fiachu Forbech of Leinster. Then man made large deep chambers underground, in the place which is called Uchtar Manchula today, and, translation cuts, were made to keep off the plague. Afterwards he gave an entertainment to the king with 24 couples to the end of 7 years. Manchula, then, are the corners of Man, that is to say, Ochtar Muanchila. Great crime, again, I said. that is to say, Albana. There was a famous king here in Erin, that is to say, Ruaidh, son of Rigdond of Munster. He had an appointment of meeting with foreigners. He went to the meeting with the foreigners round the south of Alba with 3 ships. 30 were in each ship. The fleet was arrested from below in the midst of the sea. Throwing jewels and precious things into the sea did not get them off. Lots were cast among them for who should go into the sea and find out what it was that held them fast. The lot fell on the king himself. Then the king Ruaidh, son of Rigdond, leapt into the sea. The sea at once closed over him. He lighted upon a large plain, on which 9 beautiful women met him. They confessed to him that it had been they that arrested the ships, in order that he should come to them, and they gave him 9 vessels of gold to sleep with them for 9 nights, 1 night with each of them. He did so. Meanwhile, his men were not able to proceed quickly through the power of the women. Said one woman of them, it was her time of conceiving, and she would bear a son, and he would come to them to fetch his son on his return from the east. He joined his men, and they went on their voyage. They stayed with their friends to the end of 7 years, and went back a different way, and did not go near the same spot. And they landed in the bay of Albana. There the woman came up to them. The men heard their music in their brazen ship. While they were stowing their fleet, the women came ashore and put the boy out of the ship on the land where the men were. The harbor was stony and rocky. Then the boy, translation cuts, one of the stones, so that he died of it. The women saw it and cried all together, Oilbana, Oilbana, that is to say, great crime. Hence it is called Albana. The remnants of the great feast, I said. That is Tullana. It is there that Luchskim Maich gave the great feast to Luch, son of Ethna, to comfort him after the battle of Moitura, for that was his wedding feast for kingship. For the Tuath day made this Luch king after Nuadhu had been killed. As to the place in which the remnants were put, he made a large hill of them. The name was Knoll of the great feast, or remnants of the great feast, that is to say, Tullana today. Of the daughters of Tethra's nephew, that is to say, Forgal the Wily is a nephew of Tethra, king of the Fuvera, that is to say, the son of his sister, for Nia and a sister's son is the same, and a champion is also called Nia. As the account of myself I gave her, there are 2 rivers in the land of Ross. Conchobar is the name of one of them, and Duffalt the name of the other. Now, the Conchobar falls into the Duffalt, that is to say, it mixes with it, so that they are one river. I am the nephew of that man, that is to say, of Conchobar, that is to say, I am the son of Dechtana, Conchobar's sister, or I am a champion of Conchobar's. In the wood of Bathuv, that is to say, of the Morrigu, for that is her wood, that is to say, the land of Ross, and she is the battle crow, and is called the wife of Nead, that is to say, the goddess of battle, for Nead is the same as god of battle. The name I said I had, I am a hero of the plague that befalls dogs. I am Nuadhu, that is to say, I am a strong warrior of that plague, that is to say, I am wild and fierce in battles and fights. When I said, fair is this plain, the plain of the noble yoke, it was not the plain of Bray that I promised then, but the shape of the maiden, for I beheld the yoke of her 2 breasts through the opening of her smock, and it is of that I said, plain of the noble yoke, of the breasts of the maiden. When she said, no one comes to this plain who does not kill as many as Argith, that is to say, Argith in the language of the poets means 100. That is the interpretation, and this is what it means, that it is not easy to carry off the maiden unless I slay 100 men at each ford from Albana to the Boyne, together with Skenmen the Wily, the sister of her father, who will change herself into every shape there to destroy my chariot and bring about my death, said Cucullin. Jeannie Grianda, she said, that is to say, she would not come with me unless I jumped the hero's salmon leap across the 3 ramparts to reach her. For 3 brothers of hers will be guarding her, that is to say, Ivor and Sciobor and Cat. and a company of 9 each of them. And I must deal a blow on each 9, from which 8 will die, but no stroke will reach any of her brothers amongst them. And I must carry her and her foster sister with their load of gold and silver out of the dun of Forgal. Then Sweyn, son of Roscmella, which she said this is the same thing. That is to say, that I shall fight without harm to myself from Samhain, that is to say, the end of summer. For 2 divisions were formerly on the year, that is to say, summer from Beltana, the feast of May, and winter from Samhain to Beltana, or Samhain, that is to say, Sweyn, for it is then that the gentle voices of sound, that is to say, Salve son, gentle sound, to Oimulk, that is to say, the beginning of spring, that is to say, different is its wet, that is to say, the wet of spring and the wet of winter, or Oivelk, that is to say, Oi, in the language of poetry, is the name for a sheep, whence Oivau is named. Ut dictor Quainvau, Ekvau, Duinba, as Bath is the name for death. Oivelk, then, is the time in which the sheep come out and are milked, whence Oishk, that is to say, Oishk, that is to say, barren sheep. To Beldana, that is to say, Beltana, that is to say, favoring fire, for the Druids used to make 2 fires with great incantations, and drive the cattle between them against the plagues every year. Or to Belduin, that is to say, Bel, the name of an idol, and at that time the young of every neat were placed in the possession of Bel. Beldana, then Beltana, to Broen Trogel, that is to say, Lamnaste, that is to say, the beginning of autumn, for it is then that the earth is afflicted, that is to say, the earth under fruit. Trogov is a name for earth. Cuchulainn went driving on his way, and slept the night in Evanmacha. Then their daughters told the lords of land of the youth that had come in his splendid chariot, and of the conversation which he and Ever had held, that they did not know what they had said to one another, and that he had turned from them across the plain of Bray northwards. Then the lords of land tell Forgal the wily that, and that the girl had spoken to him. It is true, said Forgal the wily. The madman from Evanmacha has been here to converse with Ever, and the girl has fallen in love with him, and that is why they talked to one another. But it shall avail them nothing. I shall hinder them from getting what they wish. Thereupon Forgal the wily went towards Evanmacha in the garb of a foreigner. It was as if it were an embassy from the king of the foreigners that came to confer with Concovad, and offering to him of golden treasures of the white foreigners, and all sorts of good things besides. Their number was 3. Great welcome was made to him then. When he had sent away his men on the 3rd day, Cuchulainn and Conall and the other chariot chiefs of the men of Ulster were praised before him, and he said it was true, and that the chariot chiefs performed marvellously. But that were Cuchulainn to go to Domhnall the soldiery in Alba, his skill would be more marvellous, and if he went to Scathach to learn soldiery feats, he would excel the warriors of all Europe. But it was for this that he proposed it to Cuchulainn, that he might not come back again, for he thought that if Cuchulainn was in her friendship, he would get death thereby, through the wildness and fierceness of the warrior yonder. And, translation cuts, Cuchulainn consented to go, and Forgal bound himself that were he to go in that time, he would give to Cuchulainn whatever he wished. Forgal went home, and the warriors arose in the morning, and set themselves to do what they had vowed. They went, namely, Cuchulainn and Logi the victorious, and Concovad and Conall Cernach, some say, went with them. Cuchulainn then went across Bray to visit the maiden. He spoke with Ever before he went in his ship. The maiden told him that it was Forgal who had desired him and Evan to go and learn the soldiery feats, in order that Ever and he might not meet. And she told him to be on his guard wherever he went, lest he should destroy him. Each of them promised the other their chastity until they met again, unless either of them should get their death thereby. They bade farewell to each other, and he turned towards Alba. When they had arrived at Domhnall's, they were taught by him to blow leathern bellows under the flagstone of the small hole. They would perform on it till their souls were black or livid. They were taught another thing on a spear, on which they would jump and perform on its point, that is to say, the champions coiling round the points of spears, or dropping on its head. Then the daughter of Domnall, Dornola by name, fell in love with Cuchulainn. Her form was very gruesome. Her knees were large, her heels turned before her, her feet behind her, big dark grey eyes in her head, her face as black as a bowl of jet. She had a very strong forehead, her rough, bright red hair in threads round her head. Cuchulainn refused to lie with her. Then she swore to be revenged on him for this. Domnall said Cuchulainn would not have true knowledge of what he was taught until he went to Scothach, who lived eastwards of Alba. So the four went across Alba, that is to say, Cuchulainn and Conchobar, the king of Ulster, and Conall Cernach and Logia the victorious. Now, before their eyes appeared unto them Evan Macha. Now, Conchobar and Conall and Logia were not able to go past it. The daughter of Domnall had raised that vision in order to sever Cuchulainn from his companions to his ruin. This is what other versions say, that it was Forgal the Wily who raised that vision before them, to make them turn back, so that Cuchulainn, through his returning, should not fulfill what he had promised to him at Evan, and thus would he be shamed thereby, or he would preventure to go east, to learn soldiery feats, both known and unknown. Translation cuts. Of Aoife. He should all the more get death through being alone. Then, of his own will, Cuchulainn went away from them on an unknown road. Translation cuts. For the powers of the girl were great, and she wrought evil against him, and severed him from his companions. Now, when Cuchulainn went across Alba, he was sad and gloomy and weary for the loss of his comrades, for he knew whither he should go to seek Scothach. For he had promised his comrades not to return to Evan unless he had reached Scothach or found death. When he saw he was astray and ignorant, he lingered. While he was there, he beheld a terrible beast like a lion coming towards him, which kept regarding him, nor did him any harm. Whatever way he went, the beast went before him, and moreover it turned its side towards him. Then he took a leap and was on its neck. He did not guide it then, but went wherever the beast liked. 4 days they went in that wise, until they came to the bounds of dwellers, and to an island where lads were rowing on a small loch. They laughed at the unwonted sight of the hurtful beast yonder doing service to a man. Cuchulainn then leapt off, and the beast parted from him, and he blessed it. Then he went on, and came to a large house in a great glen. There he met a maiden of fair make in the house. The maiden addressed him and bade him welcome. "Welcome to thy coming, O Cuchulainn," said she. He asked whence she knew him. She answered that they had both been dear foster children with Ol Vechan Sexa. "When I was there, and thou learning sweet speech from him," said she. The maiden gave him to drink and to eat, and then he turned from her. He then met a brave youth who made the same welcome to him. They exchanged converse between them. Cuchulainn was asking to know the way to the Dun of Scothach. The youth taught him the way across the plain of ill luck which lay before him. On the hither half of the plain, the feet of men would stick fast. On the further half, the grass would rise to hold them fast on the points of its blades. The youth gave him a wheel, and told him to follow its track thence across one half of the plain. Then he gave him an apple, and told him to follow the ground where the apple would run, and that in such wise he would reach the far end of the plain. Then Cuchulainn went across the plain. He proceeded further. The youth had also told him there was a large glen before him, and a single narrow path through it, which was full of monsters that had been sent by Forgal to destroy him, and that was his road to the house of Scothach, across terrible high strong districts. Then each of them wished a blessing to the other, Cuchulainn and the youth, Ehu Barcha. He it was who taught him how he should win honour in the house of Scothach. The same youth also foretold him what he would suffer of hardships and the straits of the cattle spoil of Coolna. He also told him what evil and exploits and contests he would achieve against the men of Erin. Then Cuchulainn went on that road across the plain of ill luck, and through the perilous glen as the youth had taught him. This was the road which Cuchulainn took, to the camp where the scholars of Scothach were. He asked where she was. "In yonder island," said they. "Which way must I go to her?" said he. "By the bridge of the cliff," said they, "and no man can cross it before he has achieved valor, for on this wise was that bridge. It had two low heads and the mid space, and whenever anybody would leap on its one head, the other head would lift itself up and throw him on his back." This is what some versions relate here, that a crowd of the warriors of Erin were in that dun learning feats from Scathach. That is to say, Ferdia, son of Davin, and Nisha, son of Usnach, and Lochmor, son of Egilvas, and Fiovun, son of Fora, and an innumerable host besides. But it is not told in this version that they were there at that time. Cuchulainn then tried 3 times to cross the bridge, and could not do it. The men jeered at him. Then he grew mad, and made the hero salmon leap, so that he got on its midst. And the other head of the bridge had not yet fully raised itself when he reached it, and threw himself from it, and was on the ground of the island. He went to the dun, and struck the door with the shaft of his spear so that it went through it. Scathach was told. "True," said she, "someone who has achieved valor somewhere else," and from her she sent her daughter to know who the youth was. Then Uthach, the daughter of Scathach, went forth. She looked at him, but did not speak to him, so much did the striking shape which she saw on the youth move her desire. She went back to where her mother was, and praised to her the man whom she had seen. "The man has pleased thee," said her mother. "I see it by thee." "It is true," said the maiden. "He has pleased me," said she. "But sleep thou with him tonight, if that is what thou asketh." "It is indeed not unpleasant to me," said Scathach, "if it be by thy own will." The maiden served him water and food, and looked to his pleasure. She made him boldly welcome in the shape of a servant, that is to say, profiting by it. Cuchulainn took hold of her, and broke her finger. The maiden shrieked, and the whole household came to help, and the people of the dun also. Then arose also a champion against him, that is to say, Cochard Crufna, a warrior of Scathach's. He and Cuchulainn attacked each other, and fought together for a long time. Then the champion remembered his feats of valor, and Cuchulainn returned them as if he had been taught them from his youth, and the champion fell by him, and he struck his head off. Sorrowful was the woman Scathach at this. Then Cuchulainn said to her, he would take upon himself the work and service of the man that had fallen, so that he was the leader of her host and her champion in his stead, and that Uthach came and conversed with Cuchulainn. On the 3rd day, the maiden advised Cuchulainn that if it was to achieve valor that he had come, he should go through the hero's salmon leap at Scathach, where she was teaching her 2 sons, Quad and Ket, in the great yew tree when she was there. That he should set his sword between her 2 breasts until she gave him his 3 wishes. That is to say, to teach him without neglect, and that he might wed her, Uthach, without the payment of the wedding gift, and to tell him what would befall him, for she was a prophetess. Then Cuchulainn went to the place where Scathach was. He placed his 2 feet on the 2 edges of the basket of the cless, and bared his sword, and put its point at her heart, saying, "Death over thee," said he. "Thy 3 wishes from me," said she. "That is to say, thy 3 wishes as thou canst utter them in one breath." "They shall be taken," said Cuchulainn. He then pledged her. Other versions say here that Cuchulainn took Scathach with him to the shore, and lay with her there, and slept with her, and it was then that she sang this, prophesying to him everything that would befall him, saying, "Welcome, O..." Translation cuts. But it is not thus told after this account. Uthach then slept with Cuchulainn, and Scathach taught him skill of arms. During the time he was with Scathach and the husband of Uthach, her daughter, a certain famous man who lived in Munster, that is to say, Lugith, son of Nos, son of Alovach, the renowned king and foster brother of Cuchulainn, went eastwards with 12 chariot chiefs of the high kings of Munster, to woo 12 maidens of the men of Macrosa. All of these were betrothed to men before. When Forgal the Wily heard this, he went to Tara and said to Lugith that the best maiden in Erin, both in shape and in chastity and in handiwork, was living with him unmarried. Lugith said it pleased him well. Then Forgal betrothed the maiden to the king, and the 12 daughters of the 12 lords of land and Bray besides to the 12 under-kings that were together with Lugith. The king went along with Forgal to his dun for the wedding. When now Ever was brought to Lugith to sit by his side, she took in both hands his 2 cheeks, and laid it on the troth of his honour and his life, and confessed that it was Cuchulainn that she loved, that Forgal was against it, that it was a loss of honour for anyone to take her to wife. Then, from fear of Cuchulainn, Lugath did not dare sleep with Ever, and he returned home again. Scathach was at that time carrying on a war against other tribes over which the Princess Aoife was ruling. Then, the two hosts assembled to fight. Cuchulainn was put in bonds by Scathach, and a sleeping potion had been given to him before, that he might not go to the battle, lest anything should happen to him there. As a precaution she did this. Then forthwith out of his sleep started Cuchulainn after an hour. While anybody else would have slept 24 hours with this sleeping potion, it was only 1 hour for him. He then went with the 2 sons of Scathach against the 3 sons of Elsuanach, that is to say, Quar and Ket and Crua, the 3 warriors of Aoife's. Alone he met them all 3, and they fell by him. There was a meeting in battle on the next morning, and both hosts went until the 2 arrays were face to face. Then went the 3 sons of Esha Echinda, that is to say, Kira and Bera and Blachna, 3 other warriors of Aoife, and began combat against the 2 sons of Scathach. They went on the path of feats. Scathach uttered a sigh at this, for she knew not what would come of it, first, as there was no third man with her 2 sons against those 3. And then she was afraid of Aoife, because she was the hardest woman warrior in the world. Then Cuchulainn went up to her 2 sons, and sprang on the path, and met them all 3, and they fell by him. Aoife challenged Scathach to combat. Cuchulainn went up before Aoife, and asked what it was that she loved most. Scathach said, "What she loves most," said she, "is her 2 horses, and her chariot, and her charioteer." Cuchulainn and Aoife went on the path of feats, and began combat there. Then Aoife shattered Cuchulainn's weapon, so that his sword was no longer than his fist. "Ah," he cried, "the charioteer of Aoife and her 2 horses and her chariot have fallen down in the glen, and all have perished." At that Aoife looked up. Then Cuchulainn approached her, and seized her at her 2 breasts, and took her on his back like a shoulder load, and carried her with him to his own host. Then he threw her from him to the ground, and placed his bare sword over him. And Aoife said, "Life for life, O Cuchulainn." "My 3 wishes to me," said he. "Thou shalt have them, as they come with thy breath," said she. "These are my 3 wishes," said he. "Thou to give hostage to Scathach, without ever afterwards opposing her. Thou to be with me this night before the dun, and to bear me a son." "I promise it all thus," said she. It was done that wise. Cuchulainn then went with Aoife, and slept with her that night. Then Aoife said she was with child, and that she would bear a boy. "I shall send him this day 7 years to Erin," said she, "and do thou leave a name for him." Cuchulainn left a golden ring finger for him, and said to her that he should go seek him in Erin when the ring would fit on his finger, and he said that Conla was the name to be given to him. And he told her that he should not make himself known to anyone, that he should not go out of the way of any man, nor refuse combat to any man. Thereupon Cuchulainn returned back again to his own people, and came along the same road. He met an old woman on the road who was blind of her left eye. She asked him to beware, and not to be on the road before her. He said there was no room for footing for him, save on the cliff of the sea which was beneath him. She besought him to leave the road to her. Then he left the road except that his toes clung to it. When she passed over him, she hit his great toe to throw him off the path down the cliff. He noticed it, and leapt the hero's salmon leap up again, and struck the woman's head off. She was the mother of the last 3 warriors that had fallen by him, that is to say, Esha and Chinda, and in order to destroy him had come to meet him. Thereafter the hosts went with Scathach to her own land, and hostages were given to her by Aoife, and Cuchulainn stayed there for the day of his recovery. After the full lore of soldiery feats with Scathach had passed for Cuchulainn, as well as the apple feat, the thunder feat, the blade feat, the foan feat, the spear feat, the rope feat, the body feat, the cat feat, the salmon feat of a chariot chief, the throw of the staff, the jump over, translation cuts off, the whirl of a brave chariot chief, the spear of the bellows, the boy of swiftness, the wheel feat, the author feat, the breath feat, the brúdhgeva, the hero's whoop, the blow, translation cuts, the counter blow, running up a lance and riding the body on its point, the scythe chariot, and the heroes twisting round the point of spears. Then came a message to him to return to his own land, and he took leave. Then Scathach told him what would befall him in the future, and sang to him in the seer's large shining keen, and spake these words: "Welcome, O victorious warlike." Translation cuts. Then Cuchulainn went in his ship to reach Erin. This was the crew of the one ship, that is to say, Lugad and Luan da Mac Luch, and for Beath and Lauren, and for Diad and Drust, son of Sherb, they went to the house of Ruth, king of the Isles, on Samhain night. There were before them Conall Cernach and Logi Vuadach, levying tribute, for there was tribute at that time from the Isles of the foreigners to the men of Ulster. Then Cuchulainn heard a wailing before him in the dun of the king. "What lament is that?" said Cuchulainn. "The daughter of Ruaidh is taken, as a tribute to the Fovera," said they. "It is therefore that the wailing is in the dun." "Where is the maiden?" said he. "She is on the shore below," said they. Cuchulainn went until he was near the maiden on the strand. He asked tidings of her. The maiden told him fully. "Whence do the men come?" said he. "From the distant island yonder," said she. "Be not here in sight of the robbers." He remained there waiting for them, and killed the 3 Fovera in single combat, but the last man wounded him at the wrist. The maiden gave him a strip from her garment round his wound. Then he went away without making himself known to the maiden. The maiden came to the dun and told her father the whole story. Thereafter Cuchulainn came to the dun like every other guest. Then Conall and Logier welcomed him. Many in the dun boasted of having killed the Fovera, but the maiden did not believe them. A bath was prepared by the king, and each one was brought to her separately. Then Cuchulainn came like everybody else, and the maiden recognized him. "I shall give the maiden to thee," said Ruaidh, "and I shall pay her wedding gift myself." "Not so," said Cuchulainn. "Let her come this day a year to Erin after me, if it be pleasant with her, and she will find me there." Cuchulainn then came to Evan, and told his adventures there. When he had cast his fatigue from him, he set out for the Rath of Forgal to seek Ever. He was a whole year near it, but could not approach her for the number of the watch. He came then at the end of the year. "It is today, O Loich," said Cuchulainn. "We have our meeting with the daughter of Ruaidh, but we do not know the exact place, for we were not wise. Let us go," said he, "to the border of the land." When they were on the shore of Loch Cuan, they beheld 2 birds on the sea. Cuchulainn put a stone in his sling and aimed at the birds. The men ran up to them after having hit one of the birds. When they came up to them, this is what they saw: 2 women, the most beautiful in the world. These were Devorgil, the daughter of Ruaidh, and her handmaiden. "Evil is the deed thou hast done, O Cuchulainn," said she. "It was to meet thee we came, though thou hast hurt us." Cuchulainn sucked the stone out of her with its clot of blood round it. "I shall not wed thee now," said Cuchulainn, "for I have drunk thy blood. But I shall give thee to my companion here, that is to say, to Lugad of the Red Stripes." And it was done thus. Cuchulainn then wanted to go to the Rath of Forgal, and the scythe chariot was prepared for Cuchulainn that day. It was called the scythe chariot from the iron scythes that were from it, or, again, because it was first invented by the Syrians. Then he arrived at the Rath of Forgal, and jumped the hero salmon leap across the 3 ramparts, so that he was on the ground of the dun. And he dealt 3 blows on the lish, so that 8 men fell from each blow, and 1 man escaped in the midst of each group of 9, that is to say, Sciavor and Eivor and Cat, the 3 brothers. That is to say, Sciavor and Eivor and Cat, 3 brothers of Ever. Forgal then made a leap onto the rampart of the Rath without, in fleeing from Cuchulainn, and he fell and was without life. Cuchulainn took Ever with him, and her foster sister, with their 2 loads of gold and silver, and took a leap back across the 3rd rampart with the 2 maidens, and went forth. Cries were raised around them from every direction. Skendmund rushed against them. Cuchulainn killed her on the ford, which is hence called the Ford of Skendmund. Thence they came to Glondath. There Cuchulainn killed 100 men of them. "Great is the deed which thou hast done," said Ever, "to have killed 100 able-bodied men." "Glondath shall be its name for ever," said Cuchulainn. He reached Crewfoot. Its name was originally Ray Vaughan until then. He dealt great angry blows on the host in that place, so that the streams of blood broke over it on each side. The height is a turf of blood through thee today, O Cuchulainn, cried the maiden. So hence it is called Cru Foot, that is to say, Cro Ut, that is to say, turf of blood. The pursuers overtook them at Athen Foot, on the Boyne. Ever left a chariot. Cuchulainn made a chase on the shore, so that clods flew from the hooves of the horses across the ford northwards. He made another chase northwards, so that the clods flew from the hooves of the horses over the ford southwards. Whence it is called the ford of the two clods, from the clods hither and thither. Now, Cuchulainn killed 100 on each ford from Athsken-Mend at Olbina to the Boyne of Bray, and he fulfilled all the deeds he had vowed to the maiden, and he came safely out of it, and reached Evan-Macha towards the darkness of that night. Ever was brought into the Red Branch to Conchobar and the men of Ulster, and they bade her welcome. There was a grim, evil-tongued man of the men of Ulster in that house, that is to say, Brichru of the venomous tongue, the son of Arba. It was then he said, Forsooth, it will be disagreeable to Cuchulainn what will happen tonight. That is to say, the woman whom he brought with him will sleep with Conchobar, for with him is the deflowering of virgins before the men of Ulster ever. Cuchulainn grew mad when he heard that, and shook himself so that the cushion burst which was under him, and its feathers were flying about the house. He went out then. This is very hard, said Cathvas, but it is an ordinance to the king to do everything that Brichru has said. Cuchulainn will slay him that will sleep with his wife. Let Cuchulainn be called to us, said Conchobar, to know if we can soothe his wrath. Then Cuchulainn came. Arise, said Conchobar, and bring me the herds that I have in Slieve Fuat. Then Cuchulainn went, and drove together whatever he found in Slieve Fuat of swine and stags, and every sort of foul game besides, and drove them in one drove with him to the meadow of Evan. Then his wrath had departed from him. A council was held by the men of Ulster about this affair. This was the resolution they arrived at, that Ever was to sleep the night with Conchobar, and Fergus and Cathvas in one bed with them, to watch over the honour of Cuchulainn, and the men of Ulster should bless him if he accepted it. He did accept it, and it was done thus. Conchobar paid Ever's wedding gift on the morrow, and Cuchulainn's honour price was paid, and he slept then with his wife, and they did not separate after that, until they both died. The chieftainry of the youths of Ulster was given to Cuchulainn. These were the youths in Evan at that time, about whom the poets spoke, setting forth their names. The youths of Evan, the fairest host, when they were in the Red Branch, forbade white the rod with Cusgrith and Cormac, Conig Glasna Glan, Fiachig and Fincath, Cuchulainn hard as steel and bright, the victorious son of Dactara, Fiachna, Fulvan was there, Cacht, Mane, Crimthund, the 7 Manes of Slieve and Con, Bres, Nar, Lothar, the 6 sons of Fergus were there, Ilarcles, Ilan, Fiavan, Bruna, Brie, Mo, Cleadbach, Conry, Lagier Kess, Conal Clain, the 2 Ethers noble and fair, Mesdidath and Mesjiddath, the beloved children of Avergen Gunnach, Concrea the son of Clas, from Slieve Oil, Concrea the son of Bad Bernard Bron, Concrea the son of Jerg the son of Finn, Concrea Suna the son of Saelken, A the son of Finn Jerg, Olach Brech, A the son of Findach, a host of strength, A the son of Conal, Kirid Oath, A the son of Don, A the son of Duach, Fergus the son of Leta, a bright festival, Fergus the son of Jerg, the son of Dara, Fergus the son of Ross, the verses say, Fergus the son of Dub, the son of Crimthund, the 3 sons of Treglathan, strong renowned, Shidhuith, Curach, and Carmen, the 3 sons of Ushlin of the battles, Nisha and Anla and Arden, the 3 Flans, the 3 Finns, the 3 Cons of Cool, the names of the 9 sons of Skill, the 3 Fallons, the 3 Conlacan, the 3 sons of Neil, the 3 sons of Sheetgal, Lon and Ilach, the most beautiful men, the foster brothers of Cormac Crickith, the 3 Dongas, the son of Macrosa, the 3 Dungas, the 3 Daelgos, the poets of Cormac Cool, the 9 sons of Lear, son of Etterschale, his 3 hornpipers, fair the deed, Finn, Eilchas, and Ilan, his 3 hornblowers of music next, 2 Aiths and Fergin, 3 jesters to make sharp remarks, Arathna, Jerk, and Drovel, his 3 distributors of renown, Finn, Urath, and Fathavan, 3 grandsons of Cletach, bright perfection, Uath, Urth, and Ashlinga, Aith, Eilchas, renowned in Evan, 2 fair sons of Ilgavla, the son of Brechru, who, translation cuts, with the youths of Evan. Tochmarc Emire is a brilliant tale, one with a life before the version we read here and an afterlife that stretches far, all the way into the present. The story is rich with fascinating details. The riddling dialogue between Cuchulainn and Ever has a close analogy with riddling dialogues between Finn McCool and Alva, not the dog we discussed last week, in Tochmarc Alva. And outside of a romantic context, there are similarities with the quarrel between Finn and Oisin. We catch glimpses of curious details, such as Ever's father being the nephew of Tethra, one of the Fuvra kings we saw in Cath Mag Turuth, and references to other texts, such as Scathach's prophecy, referring to the earlier Werba Scathaga, the brief mention of the foster brothers of Tombo Kulina, the appearance of Differgil, and the setup for the story where Cuchulainn will eventually kill his own son that he has conceived with Aoife. Potentially, among the many things which I find are interesting about Tochmarc Emire is the representation of Clessa, a term taken in our translation as feats, Cles singular for feet, these being the strange combat techniques that Scathach trains Cuchulainn in. If you want to learn more about them, and why I think they are an extrapolation out of historic juggling traditions, and not evidence of a lost medieval Irish martial art, however cool that would have been, you can find my discussion in the forthcoming 2025 summer volume of Cambrian Medieval Celtic Studies, or CMCS for short. Despite how exciting Clessa are, I will not discuss them here as to not spoil that forthcoming piece, and instead I will return our attention to the work of Roy O'Higgin, in his Marriage, Law and Tochmarc Emire, which was a Quiggin Memorial Lecture at the University of Cambridge, later published and now available for free online. Now, we will not be delving into the entirety of Professor O'Higgin's discussion, as, with great strides befitting his favourite hero, Fergus MacRoich, he covers tremendous temporal mountains, discussing the life and afterlife of the text, and the interrelation it has with other material. Instead, I would like to focus on his discussion of the relationships and unions within the tale. Tochmarc Emire is a tale deeply concerned with relationships. The entire story is instigated by a mixture of patriarchal anxieties surrounding relationships. The aristocrats of Ulster are uncomfortable that their wives and daughters are all in love with the young, effeminate Cuchulainn, and want him to be married off so these anxieties can be put to rest. Similarly, we get a glimpse of the deeply tragic relationship between Cuchulainn and these people. He is a deterrent, their superweapon, but they know he won't be around forever. So, they want a second bullet in the chamber. They want Cuchulainn Mark II. They need him to produce a son, objectifying Cuchulainn and this hypothetical child, rendering down to be little more than weapons to be used up. As discussed by O'Higgin, and I'm sure as all of you noticed, Cuchulainn and Ever make a pact to be faithful to each other while Cuchulainn is away in training. Something which Ever holds to, but Cuchulainn does not. However, as noted by O'Higgin, it isn't as clear-cut as it may appear at first. Cuchulainn rejects the advances of the first 2 women which come on to him in the text. He rejects Dornola, daughter of Domnall, the first person to train him, who uses some ill-defined supernatural power to isolate him from his friends and forces Cuchulainn to travel alone as part of Dornola attempting to avenge this perceived slight of Cuchulainn refusing to be with her. Similarly, he rejects Uthach, Scathach's daughter, when she first tries to sleep with him, breaking her finger as he evidently rejects her. This is an interesting scene that I believe should be discussed in greater depth, particularly as Uthach has disguised herself as a lower status woman when she makes these advances. She has already received permission from Scathach to pursue Cuchulainn, and since in this land Scathach appears to be functioning as the local patriarch, This means that Uthach is not disguising herself to conceal this attempted relationship from the locals, but to conceal her identity from Cuchulainn. Why he breaks her finger is unclear, but as a higher status person, violence against what he believes is a lower status person is not tremendously costly financially to him. However, the forceful nature of the rejection, I think, is curious. If we play a little experiment and inverse the genders of these characters, if a man in disguise came to the room of a young woman who had just arrived in his father's hall, after getting permission from his father to sleep with her, and the young woman rejects the young man's advances, breaking one of his fingers in the process, we would assume this is necessary force, that this may have been an attempted assault. Why do we, on reflex, not consider that this may have been the case here, particularly in a land where ideas about gender are being manipulated? As noted by O'Higgin, Cuchulainn does relent to Uthach's advances when doing so benefits him. When she betrays her mother and tells Cuchulainn how to force Scathach to teach Cuchulainn to be the greatest warrior, to waive the need of a bride price for Cuchulainn to have a relationship with her, and to force Scathach to divine his future. This, I think, we should dig into. Here, Uthach is betraying her mother, and is incorporating her own desires to enter a relationship with Cuchulainn into this special wish-making process she is giving Cuchulainn. In exchange for getting what she wants, a relationship with Cuchulainn, she is offering Cuchulainn a way to get perfect training, what he has set out to do to marry Emer, and to receive the prophecy of his future. If we read Cuchulainn generously, something which I note is rather rarely done despite the fact that we're dealing with a preteen being forced in a marriage to produce an heir by a bunch of adults, we should consider that this is the process for him to become the man Ever wants to marry. He is, potentially, violating his oath to Ever, but he is doing so in order to follow Ever's expectations for him. Now we have an interesting aside. Our story mentions that in other versions, none of which survive to us, that Cuchulainn sleeps with Scathach, but then explains to us that this does not happen in this version, before resuming the narrative. So, while this is notable, we shall skip over this for our tale, because our story specifically identifies this as not part of the canon of our narrative here. Flashing back to Ireland, Forgal tries to marry Ever off to Lugad mac Nos, but, as noted by O'Higgin, she is able to convince Lugad not to marry her by grabbing his two cheeks and appealing to his honor, which O'Higgin notes can be compared to Cuchulainn later grabbing Aoife by her breasts. I would offer the alternative angle, that this is something like an inversion of what happens in another story, Longish mac Aisling, where a young woman, Deirdre, grabs the ears of a young warrior, Nisha, Cuchulainn's cousin, and threatens to shame him if he will not elope with her and betray his people. Similarly, I suggest that we could potentially read this in the context of Cuchulainn rejecting Uthach. Now, back to Cuchulainn. The next union he enters is with Aoife, a tricky situation. From our perspective, this is absolutely rape, but things are less clear from medieval Ireland's perspective, particularly concerning that this is in a strange foreign land where gender roles are being inverted, and medieval Irish law operates under the assumption that men cannot be raped. Although this is something they are at times clearly questioning, which I discuss in a different forthcoming paper. The relationship between Cuchulainn and Aoife is one that is clearly in flux in the tradition, as noted by O'Higgin, that other tales dealing with this relationship represent this as a loving relationship, or change Aoife's relationship with Scathach in significant ways, which suggests that Cuchulainn's relationship with Aoife also shifts. But, in our version of the story, Cuchulainn forces Aoife to bear him a son, obviously, again, a horrific action that makes reading Cuchulainn generously very difficult. But, considering what we have seen so far with Cuchulainn, and what we will see in the future, things are a bit more complicated than they appear at a glance. As noted by O'Higgin, Cuchulainn has only slept with Uthach to advance his goals. So, can we read this in a similar context? The text is clearly suggesting some link, as the method Uthach teaches him to force Scathach to offer up 3 wishes is the same one Cuchulainn uses on Aoife here. Well, let us turn back to the start of the tale. All of these events are being set in motion because the Ulstermen want Cuchulainn Mark II. And if you notice in our story, Aoife is a better warrior than Cuchulainn. He has to employ underhanded tactics to win, distracting her with what honestly might be the earliest reference to a "hey look over there" ploy. If we want to read Cuchulainn generously, which again I think it is entirely reasonable not to do if you don't want to, but if we do, Cuchulainn is trying to accomplish the goals that he has been set as a child by the patriarchs of his community. The next union, or attempted union, that with Devorgil, is once again rather curious. In a suspiciously Perseus-like tale, Cuchulainn rescues Devorgil from Fovera, but appears rather uninterested in her. Note that when her father says that he will give Devorgil to Cuchulainn, Cuchulainn refuses and says that if she wants, she can come in a year to where Cuchulainn will be. When she eventually comes, Cuchulainn injures her when she is in the form of a bird and sucks a stone out of her wound, explaining that he cannot marry her because he has drunk her blood. A strange scene again, and one that my friend Kiki Ingoldsdotter has shown to have some very curious, possibly sexual elements to it, and O'Higgins suggests is possibly riffing on the opposition to co-sanguine marriages, essentially refusal to marry someone you're too closely related to by blood. No matter the logic behind this, we can see Cuchulainn once again avoiding the advances of a woman. These relationships then conclude with the Ius prima noctis scene, which O'Higgins does an excellent job discussing. As he states, evidence for this custom in early Irish society is not all copious. Apart from this reference in Tochmarc Emire 2, it is also mentioned in connection with Conchobar in the late compilation Scala Conchobar MacNessa. He goes on to note that while this practice is referenced by the 17th century Geoffrey Keating as justification for divine wrath against the Irish leading to the Norman invasion, and references appear in the folk tradition, it does not appear to have been tremendously widespread. While it is interesting in our story that Conchobar evidently does not actually want to sleep with Eobheard, but is being forced into this by a Geis, a very complex topic but essentially a supernatural prohibition, injunction, compulsion, or the sort, enforced most often with the threat of imminent death. So, if Conchobar does not sleep with Eobheard, he will die. However, if he does sleep with Eobheard, Cuchulainn will kill him. The quick-minded Cathvas the Druid, Conchobar's father and Cuchulainn's grandfather, circumvents this by having Eobheard and Conchobar sleep in the same bed with himself and Fergus MacRoich, to serve as witnesses and guarantors that Conchobar and Eobheard do not have sex. However, not only that, Conchobar pays Eobheard's bride price as if he had entered a union with her, and pays Cuchulainn's honor price as if he had wronged Cuchulainn, evidently trying to smooth over the entire uncomfortable situation and keep Cuchulainn's fury in check. What these show is that Tochmarc Emire is a story deeply concerned with relationships and laws of union. Who is in a union with who? Why? What's the motivation? Who consents and who does not? Who actually loves who? And who is a disinterested partner? Are all things the text is considering. With that, we close the book on Tochmarc Emire, but we are not through the Ulster cycle, or Ulster cycle and relationships yet. We will return to these topics next week. For now, I hope you enjoyed this tale, and as ever, thank you for listening. If you have any questions, you can contact me, as always, at irishlegendspodcast@gmail.com.